Welcome back. You're watching HFO-TV, co-sponsored by AMF Capital, the Janik Law Firm, the Butler Exchange Group, and the construction firm J.R. Johnson.
Welcome back to HFO-TV. I'm Greg Frick, partner at HFO Investment Real Estate. And today we have Robert Wilkinson, a partner at Janik Law Firm, one of the preeminent law firms here in Portland. And we're going to talk a little bit about kind of some of the things in construction defects and things like that that affect our industry. So I want to thank you for coming and be glad to kind of dig into this. Maybe you can get a little background on your background and Janik's in terms of that field for our audience of apartment investors and owners.
Sure, thank you, and thank you for having me here today.
You know it.
I really appreciate the opportunity to come and talk to you about this. Janik, we're a medium-sized law firm. We have an office here in Portland. We have another office in Orlando, Florida. Where We're very active in Orlando, Florida as well right now.
Was that by chance or just some pull for Disneyland?
I wish I got out there more to the office, that's right. It is by chance. You know, Florida is such a big state for construction and construction-related problems. And we're here today to talk about construction defects, and Florida is just a hotbed of that because of the size of the development industry there and how many buildings have gone up. Of course, the weather helps too.
Yes.
Hot and humid, it rains a lot, and you know, hurricanes, you name it.
Yep.
So we do a lot of work here in Portland with development, real estate development, and of course construction, on top of a bunch of other things. But I tend to specialize more in the construction-related aspects of our practice.
Gotcha.
So I do everything from upfront construction contracting type work to construction defect litigation and construction disputes when things go wrong during a project. I do those types of litigation.
Okay. Now, is that slowed down a little bit with, you know, I know we were involved a lot 10 years ago of the condo conversions of existing multifamily, and then we'd always said there'd always be something after the conversion.
Right.
You know, we haven't seen really the condo market come back, so has that kind of peeled back a little bit in terms of the velocity of the defect claims?
It has.
It has.
It really has. I think the construction defect side of things for the HOA type world, townhomes, condos, that has really slowed down. We haven't really seen any significant condo development in the Portland area for a while, or in Oregon, really, for a while.
Yeah, I mean, there's one project that was going to be condos. Well, there's a couple in the Pearl that were kind of long tail plays, and there was the one that was going to be a condo again got switched back to apartments. So yeah,
and we might see those apartments turning into condos down the road, right? We may see some of those conversions coming about, but yeah, there hasn't been a whole lot of construction of that type of dwelling. We're seeing a lot more multifamily apartments, of course, as you know. So that seems where all the energy is right now.
And so on a standard multifamily where it's not an HOA, it's not going to be condos. Is there a different level of, I don't want to say reporting, but in terms of the defect requirement? Is it? I mean, is there a reason why the HOA was seen to be more prone to going that direction than maybe an existing owner, or is it, maybe give a little insight on that?
Well, there's specific laws that attach to condos and planned unit development type stuff. So there are specific laws that apply to that don't apply to apartment owners, commercial property owners, those types of things. So there is a little bit of a different legal framework that makes the condo cases maybe more prone to be construction defect lawsuits, if you will. And then, of course, you have the issue of, with those types of cases, you're working with boards, volunteer boards, and then the concerns of all the owners are really paramount in those kinds of cases. Whereas with an apartment, you're really working with an owner, which is, you know, sometimes one person, sometimes it's a group of people, but it's a more discreet.
It's not 100 people spread out,
and they're not living there, and the people who do live there are tenants, they're not owners, so there's quite a bit of difference between the two.
Okay, interesting. So what are you seeing in terms of on existing multifamily, kind of where we are versus maybe we were 5 years ago in terms of defects, or I mean, are things popping up now that we're surprised in terms of the quality construction or what you're seeing?
I think what I'm seeing now, I'll tell you one thing I'm seeing now more than I did before was construction defect cases that are looking at repairs that were done, remodels that were done.
So not a new construction, so to speak, it's a, gotcha, okay.
It might be a 30-year-old apartment building that was resited 6 years ago that now is showing signs of construction defects and problems. And so those types of claims are against the repair contractor or the remodel contractor that did that work, rather than going back to the original construction. So I'm seeing more of that now because there has been a lot of investment, I think.
Yeah, there's been a lot of what we call add value play, where somebody's going to come in and take an older, well, not older, 10, 20-year property, new siding, new windows, new surfaces, and...
There's been a lot of that in the industry, and so we're seeing more of those types of cases.
What's the statute? Is it 8 years plus 2 in terms of the time to look back?
I wish we had 8+2 for most big apartment buildings. Anything over 5 stories, really from the ground up,
Right.
more than 5 stories, you're looking at a 6-year statute of limitations.
Okay.
Really, so it's 6-year statute of repose, it's called, and you don't get a +2 or anything like that.
Okay,
It's a 6-year statute of repose.
Okay.
Within that, there are other statutes of limitations that apply. So if it's a smaller commercial building, smaller apartment building, you're going to get the full 10-year statute of repose.
You will. So it's when you're over 5 stories is when it.
There's a difference between
There is a
large
difference.
commercial structure and
Gotcha.
small commercial structure, if you will. And then within that, there are different statutes of limitations. So, for example, a negligence claim against somebody or against a contractor has to be brought within 2 years of discovering the problem.
Got it. Okay.
So that clock starts ticking the minute discovery happens. And when that happens is usually a little bit of a gray area.
I was just saying, is there kind of a discussion of what discovery is? Is it repairs? Always, yeah.
Always. I had a leaking window this month. 6 months later, I had another leaking window. 6 months later,
Right.
we had a whole bunch of leaking windows.
So when's the discovery?
When does it kick in? That's been litigated to death in the courts.
Okay.
And there's no bright line that I could say this is when you discovered it. Typically.
Now, does Oregon and Washington? I mean, we have some clients that are on across the river. Is Oregon and Washington kind of similar in the terms of time frames, or is it completely different?
Washington's got a 6-year statute too.
They do. Okay.
Yeah. So there's a little bit more nuance there with when that starts. You could have something that was discovered right before the 6-year. Maybe you have a little extra time.
Got it. Okay.
To bring it. And the law is somewhat different in Washington. In Washington, they're what you might call a privity state. So they're, as an owner of a property in Washington, you generally cannot go and sue someone who worked on your property that you didn't hire.
Gotcha.
So let's say you're a new apartment owner.
So you have
in
to hire. You
Washington.
have to be the one that.
Yeah.
Got
so
it.
Washington really goes based on contract. So
Got
if you're
it.
a new buyer of an apartment complex in Vancouver and you discover construction defects, and maybe those are caused by original construction 5 years before, but you didn't hire that original contractor. Maybe you're the second owner of the complex or whatnot. You're going to have a hard time suing that original contractor. Whereas in Oregon, it's more wide open. In Oregon, as the owner of a property, you could sue anyone who worked on that property.
At any, regardless of ownership.
Regardless of
Got it.
ownership, regardless of anything like that.
Interesting. Okay. And now on, like we talked, seen a lot of add value kind of work that's not original construction, re-siding. Is the same statute in terms of, is it 6 years from the completion of that project, or is that different depending on what the project is?
Yeah, it could be different depending on what the project is.
Okay.
Generally speaking, you're going to look at the same statute, though.
You will. Okay.
And breach of contract is a 6-year statute of limitations in Oregon. So you've got that, and there's some argument about when does that start to run. Is it from the breach? Is it from discovery of the breach? Because someone could say, oh, well, when you built the building with defects, your clock starts running because it has the defects. And then the other side of that argument is, well, not until I discover it.
Right.
Because that's not fair, right? So we get into those kinds of fights sometimes.
Gotcha. And then what do you see, what in terms of, this, let's bring up siding because it seems to be a kind of a hot. I mean, are there steps that you're advising your clients to do? Is it, is it the bonding? What do you do in terms of making sure it's done? I mean, you're not out there doing it, so you can't really make sure you're protected in terms of being the ability to go back and address it if it is done wrong.
Well, one thing you can try to address it up front on something like siding. When you're hiring a contractor, you can always hire a third set eyes on a job, right? Or second set eyes on the job, depending on how you look at it. But you can hire an owner's rep. You can hire, there are a lot of companies now that are enclosure, they call them, sort of enclosure experts. And these are folks that are expert at building envelopes, siding, roofs, windows. And a lot of times you can get those people involved up front in construction. Very common these days. A lot of the new work going on, even a lot of the remodel work going on. People hire these other parties, these independent parties, if you will, to come out and check during the construction.
Now, do they take some of the liability on that? I mean, is there ever
They try not to.
where you're going after that third party, the owner's rep, for not doing what?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that does happen. But typically their contracts are pretty limiting about
To what? Yeah.
what kind of liability they're going to have. There's sort of an architectural overlay there. And a lot of architects during original construction will do site visits and inspections, but they don't want to call it inspections. They have other words for that.
To keep the getcha.
Because they want to limit their liability for construction defects. But it helps. That's one way to do it on the front end.
And then, so we have a lot of clients that are buying existing projects, and before they're doing their due diligence, and they're looking. I mean, is there steps they should be doing on that, or what's the, if they hire a third party to go look at a project that's been repositioned, they come back and the third party says no, it looks fine, great, and then 2 years down the road they have an issue. Is it they're again going to the person that installed it and did it? Do they go after this third party? How do you look at those?
That's a really good question. I think a lot of the time you could go after both.
Okay.
All right, so you could go after the inspection company for not catching it and warning
Now, I
you
know a
about
lot of
it.
the inspection companies, their disclaimers are,
You know their disclaimers.
yes,
right?
yes, hey, we're looking at it, but go get a higher.
Our liability is limited to the
Right.
amount you're paying us for our service.
Right,
Very
okay.
common. So that's been litigated a bunch.
That has, okay.
And whether those are enforceable or not, I think is kind of an open question. Those are harder claims, in my opinion, to make because of those disclaimers
Right.
that are always there. But yeah, you know, because your inspector missed it, you can still go back against the contractor that caused that problem. You can, as long as you're within the statute. and
That
everything.
statute of time.
Yeah, as long as you've got a timely claim.
Gotcha, okay. And then, so do you guys do a lot of insurance work as well and working with companies going, okay.
We do, and that's because so much of the construction defect world ties into the insurance world.
Right.
Because you know, contractors in Oregon are required to carry insurance
Yes.
for all their work. To be licensed with the Construction Contractors Board, the CCB, they have to have a CGL policy, which covers them for bad work, if you will. So every contractor working in Oregon has insurance. And so primarily when you're talking about a construction defect case, you're talking about money being paid out of an insurance pocket,
Got it.
really, to settle the case, or to pay a judgment at the end of the day. And most of these cases do settle voluntarily through a mediation process,
Okay.
and it's insurance money.
Now, is Oregon unique in that regard, or is that pretty typical across that setup?
That's pretty typical.
It is, okay.
Yeah, it's very typical. I mean,
Okay.
some of the biggest companies might have their own insurance policies up to a certain limit, you know,
Right.
sort of that type of thing. But generally speaking, most of your cases are covered by insurance.
Gotcha. Now, in some of these defects that we have with existing projects where you've got tenants involved, you know, people
Yeah.
living in their units.
Yeah.
You know, how is that handled? Is that part of that, or is kind of the landlord-tenant law kind of go to a different, or is that all kind of covered within this realm of, hey, I'm having an issue, it's not only affecting the building, but it's also affecting my tenant in Unit A?
Yeah, really good question. We said, and that brings up a lot of complications for an owner.
Right,
Right.
exactly.
To be addressing this with tenants, and so we try to take into account things in the claim that would try to compensate the owner for having to deal with all of this with regard to the tenant. So if an owner thinks they're going to have to reside their building because of construction defects, well, that's going to cause a real disruption to
Right.
the tenants. And so we try to quantify that as best we can.
Okay.
You know, what's that going to mean? Is the owner going to have to pay the tenants or essentially give them a break on their rent for 2
Right.
months while they're putting up with banging and scaffolding and all of that? And if so, we try to tie that into the lawsuit.
Oh, you do? Okay.
We do. We try to recover that. So if there's sort of loss of use, worst case scenario,
Relocation.
people have to relocate.
Right.
You know, and now with a lot of our landlord-tenant laws, that has a real consequence too that we're just starting to see with tenant relocation costs in the city of Portland, things
Yes.
like that. I mean,
Yeah.
boy, if you have to have tenants move out, that's going to be a big cost for an owner.
Right.
And so we try to tie that back to the construction defects.
Do you ever have where it's tenant-driven defects? So, a defect on a driven by a residential tenant, which then goes to the owner, which then the owner goes to the contractor, whatever. Is that all is it kind of separate? The tenants at the going after the owner, then the owner's going after. Is that, or does it all get roped into one?
Well, all right. So if a tenant brings a claim against an owner, typically it's going to be habitability concerns,
like
right?
a mold or whatever it may be.
I've got mold,
Right.
typically something like that. I've got mold, I've got leaks coming through from piping or
Right.
from the windows or whatnot. And so the owner in those situations is going to typically tender that to their insurance.
Exactly.
Right? And so
Yeah.
the insurance typically will respond, fix that problem. And then through subrogation, an insurance company would have the ability to take what they've paid out on the repairs and go chase a contractor that may be ultimately responsible. So that's one thing how that happens. Another thing that I do see happen is an owner will make the complaint, the habitability complaint about mold or whatnot. Owner investigates. Owner maybe gets that unit fixed through insurance, but maybe that opens the door to a bigger discussion about what else is going on with
The
this
overall
building.
condition. Okay.
In which case, that's a triggering action that
Got it.
alerts the owner to, hey, maybe it's not just this one unit. Maybe I've also got bad windows at all the other units that ought to be investigated. And then that could turn into a straight construction defect claim by the owner versus contractor.
Right.
And then also maybe tied in with the insurance company trying to go after the contractor for the amount it paid for the one unit
For the one tenant and
that
back.
had the mold
Gotcha.
type thing. So I see that happening
You do?
in both,
Okay.
both scenarios. Absolutely.
And are you seeing this is kind of is the quality of, I know we've had different phases of construction. With prevalent with, litigation and things, has the quality of construction gotten better? Is it in terms of issues long term? I mean, I'm always fearful when they say we've got a new product, we're doing siding and roofing. Like, great, well, it's going to look like in 20 years. But I'm just curious from your take.
You know, I think it's a mixed answer, and I think it depends on who you ask. Because I talk to consultants that I work with all the time in my work, a lot of these enclosure consultants who review a lot of the siding and stuff. And according to some of them, you know, we are going to see we're going to see a lot more construction defect type cases down the road. That there is a lot of bad construction we're still seeing because there's so much of it, and it's hard. The labor pool is really tight right now. It's really hard for construction companies to get good superintendents, good project managers, all the way down to all the skilled labor. It's a really tough market, and so I think we are going to see more of that down the road. Generally speaking, there are a lot of new methods out there for building enclosures, for how you put the siding on and the windows, and that are better than they were 10 years ago, absolutely. But whether that's always followed, it's hard to say. I think there's a price point difference depending on the type of project you're talking about too, in terms of the quality. I think that's always been the case.
Yeah, I've heard some stories too about municipalities kind of slow on the uptake in terms of some of the new construction, you know, processes, type material that it's, you know, like trying to get something permitted in they're not familiar with, and do you see that kind of delaying the innovation, I guess, on maybe some newer construction, you know, ways of doing things? Yeah,
I think there are a lot of new products out there, and so like with any new product, some of these are going to have issues. I think you know, people have talked about what is it, the cross-laminated timbers, right? And so there are new products like that are out there. There's new roofing products. You know, there's a lot of innovative things that are happening right now, and of course some of those could have problems down the road. We saw that with the big artificial stucco EIFS, EIFS type construction that was huge here for a long time. When I first started doing construction defect cases, it was primarily focused on those kinds of buildings with that artificial stucco, that EIFS type thing. And that was a fairly new product that everyone loved, and it turned out to not be good for us and our climate.
You can say that again. Oh yeah, yes, definitely. What, have you done anything with modular construction? Have you guys been involved with it? I mean, I know it's kind of new in this market, but have you seen any, maybe not on the litigation side, but have dealt with any clients that are doing much modular construction, which we keep hearing is a way to maybe bring lower cost housing eventually? But
that's right, and I hope so, and I hope that works out. I haven't seen anything directly in the last few years on it that I've worked on, but I think I think it has the potential to be amazing. It really does, to bring those costs down, especially when we're talking about sort of the housing issues in the city of Portland with affordability and stuff. The more that we can do to bring down the cost of providing that housing for folks, I think is a good thing.
Well, and I think people forget this, we talked about it, the world we're in with litigation and things. I mean, you have soft costs that, you know, in terms of insurance and things like that you have to get in to get your product, you know, developable and deliverable, and that's a cost that, you know, it makes it tough to make affordable housing.
Huge soft costs, everything from permitting fees, everything else. I mean, it's a challenge.
Right, which is part of what we've said is why we maybe not seeing the condo conversion or the condo plays, because the delta is just not that great from apartment, but there's much more soft costs, as you brought up, more risk factors with the HOAs and the condos. So.
Yeah, there are, I think from a litigation standpoint, developers of condos and townhomes are leery. There were a lot of lawsuits for a number of years about that, and there's been some efforts made to change the law on that, to shorten the statute of limitations.
Oh, there has been, okay.
Yeah, and do some things like that. I don't know if that's going to get through this shortened session, but there has been some talk about and some proposals to shorten the statute of limitations. I think it's from 10 years to 6 years.
To maybe hopefully get housing starts up and going again. And
yeah, and other markets have really seen that happen. Denver, Colorado is a big example where they passed some real legislative changes to try to rein in construction defect lawsuits that folks there thought were holding back the development of that type of housing.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we'll have to keep an eye on that. I don't know how much will get done this short session here this year, but
doesn't
we'll
look like much at this point.
Exactly. So. Yeah. Well, thank you for coming again. If we want to get more information, they can see the website down below, and we'll get you next time, and we'll see you again next time on HFO-TV.
All right. Thank you.
Our entire office specializes in multifamily real estate, making HFO the largest multifamily brokerage in the Pacific Northwest. Your success is our passion. Build your legacy with HFO. Call 503-241-5541 or visit our website at hfore.com for more information.